Are you looking for a game that's easy to learn, fast-paced, and probably one of the cheapest ways into the Warhammer hobby? That game is Warcry, and I'm going to tell you why it's one of Games Workshop's best current gaming systems. I'm Peachy, and this is Peachy Tips. Cheers. Oh, tea. Cheers. Now before you slate me in the comments, I am not going to compare this video to Wartime or Middle-earth strategy battle game, because they are both amazing mega games in their own right, and I will cover them in separate videos of their own because they deserve it. This video is about Warcry, and I'm going to tell you why I think it's their most accessible and cheapest game to date. But before we go into all that, let's have a brief history on what is Warcry and where did it come from. So going back a few years, probably 2017, I just moved from the studio to Warhammer TV to work with my bud Dunks. And at this point, I was aware of a game coming out. There was loads of warbands. We've seen them on the super secret servers. All these cool designed warbands that had their very own aesthetic within each warband. Didn't really know what they were, didn't really know what it was for, but we knew there was a game coming out that was about Chaos Warbands. It's a bit like the Path to Glory rule set that came out, in the early 2000s, if memory serves, where it was obviously Old Hammer, or Warhammer at the time. Warhammer Fantasy Battle, we call it Old Hammer now, which is absurd. That's how old I am. But you'd have your warbands, a handful of figures, and you basically aspiring your aspiring champion up to demonhood, or maybe eventually it all goes horribly wrong and he gets turned into a spawn. All very good fun. And this new game that was coming out felt a little bit like that. You'd have Chaos Warbands, you're fighting against other Chaos Warbands, and you're basically trying to get yourself seen by Archaon and join his hallowed ranks. Now, I wasn't sure at the time if this was going to be like in the Realms of Chaos, in the Mortal Realms, or something else. Eventually, it panned out. It'll be in this area. It's like an area within the realms called the Varan Spire, or the All Points at one point. And that is where these Chaos tribes are duking it out and fighting for supremacy. So that's all very cool. Now, the reason I never got round to playing Warcry when it first came out was the age-old dilemma of Games Workshop and Games Workshop's marketing department, which was the new hotness. You need to concentrate on the new hotness and get excited about the new hotness. I was already excited about a hotness from like months back, and I was still building stuff up to that. And unfortunately, we used to call it organised fun. It sounds really terrible. It's first world problems, obviously. But you'd have like something you're invested in, you start building up to it, and then you're like, no, stop being excited about that. That was ages ago. You need to get excited about this new thing. And it's like, oh my God. So it got a bit much. And I think when Warcry came out, even though I did some content for the paint guides, I just wasn't that bothered by it. I did the bare minimum to go, yeah, I've done some paint guides. Cool. Can I carry on painting my Jeans to the Kill team, please, now? Because I'm really excited about them, which was like months ago. Now, that is sometimes the downside of working in a business that's also your hobby is you've got to sell stuff and you've got to promote stuff, but also you want to enjoy the stuff you're doing as well. So it could get a little bit much when there was all these new things, especially with a release schedule. I was like, bam, 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 so much coming out. So my instant interaction with Warcry was, I'll leave it for a bit. And then I was invited on to Warhammer TV to do a battle report. I had no idea how to play. I'd got like a bunch of Daughters of Cain stuff I was working on anyway, and I was asked to do some battle reports. I was like, yeah, sure, sounds fun. I like playing games. Luckily, a beautiful human being called Ben Gala, who was in the social media team at the time, also ex-staff member in retail, so couldn't do intro games, ran me through a game, and I played him on live, and it was the most fun I've ever had. And in short, I became a firm fan of the game. And I guess that's testament to the game system itself, that I could play a couple of games, and this is new for me as well, and I'll come to this in a bit more, but it takes a lot for me to understand rules. Whether that's just I struggle to read from a rule book, or it just I need to play a few games before it actually goes in my mind. And even then, after I've played 10, 12 games in a row and not playing for a couple of months, I still need to do some heavy reading. With Warcry, that was very different. I could play a game, get the rules instantly, and then leave it for a few days and still know the rules. That was new to me. I don't know if it was just that was my game, or if that was just the way that the rules have been written, that they're just easy and accessible, quite straightforward, that anyone can pick up and then play as and when. I don't know. It's magic. It was a magic rule set, and it sung to me. I was very much taken by this rule set. But what is Warcry? Peachy, you've gone on about some stuff, but you've not actually said what Warcry is. Good question. What is Warcry? So at the time, Warcry was a skirmish game between vying Chaos Warbands to basically get the attentions of Archaon, and join as elite Varangard. That is the general gist of, I mean, that's really like condensing it, but you played one of the various tribes against other people with one of the various tribes, smash each other to pieces, and then just play through a campaign and get items and equipment and this and the other. But the general narrative of it was you're trying to like be seen by Archaon because he has the Varan Spire. In there are the elite Varangard. And he's he's the big bad, isn't he, right? So he's the guy you want to look up to. He's like Sauron or Thanos. He's the one you want to be like the right-hand man of. So yeah, that was the general concept, is all these warring tribes scattered across the Bloodwind spoil, basically trying to get the attentions of Archaon. I mean, to be fair, it's a big ask because these tribes really hammer at each other. There's not many survivors, and those that do survive probably have to go through loads of trials before they even become a Varangard. So I guess the sort of rate of recruitment is quite low, and you're really lucky if you do get through. But, once you're through and you're there, it's well worth it. All the rewards of chaos are yours, whatever they might be. Probably just be turned into a spawn. I mean, that happens a lot. Now, in the initial release, you got this massive jam-packed box set filled full of scenery, chaotic beasts, and 2 warbands, one called the Untamed Beasts and one called the Iron Golem. Some armoured-looking chaosy legionnaire dudes, and then just some semi-naked barbarians with monsters. And they look great. On top of that, to support it, there were some other warbands that came out. So you had the Corvus Cabal, weird birdmen. You had the Unmade, which was sort of like really creepy, we skin ourselves and wear it kind of crazy chaos guys. Then you had the Splintered Fang, which were my favourite. Look very Grecian, but they like snakes. They're big fans of snakes and poisons. And then finally, there was the Cypher Lords, which are very Tzeentchian in their vibe and look, which I quite like. And then later on, they'll be supported by some other warbands that will come out. So you have the Spire Tyrants, which then became my favourite at the time because they were just like cool-looking gladiatorial chaos warriors. A bit of a mishmash of everything, really, but they're mega. Then you had the Signs of the Flame, which are quite cool looking. I think a lot of people use these for Cities of Sigma, sort of like Realm of Akshi kind of Cities of Sigma dudes, because they're quite cool looking. And then you had the first non-Chaos Warband, which was the Cainite Shadowstalkers. I still have yet to build mine. As a fan of Cainites and Daughters of Cain, I never did get around to building mine. I've still got them in a box up here waiting to be built, so I do need to get on that. I think they're half built, can't remember. It's not important. The Signs of the Flame and the Cainite Shadowstalkers came in their own little box set called Catacombs, which was like fighting in like dungeons, basically. It was a nice dungeon crawl, a good way of, I guess, getting that D&D element into it. You got some cool scenery in there as well, plus the scenery, similar scenery that you got with the first box set as well. So it was a nice little add-on set, got some cool tiles in there, and I really liked that. It was a nice vibe. Of playing like interior battles. And that's kind of where my Hag Valkyr sort of inspirations came from. I was like, oh yeah, I can fight inside, don't always have to be outside. That's cool. I'm going to do a temple. Check that video out up here somewhere where I talk about in more depth about my Hag Valkyr and my Daughters of Cain stuff, which is great fun. You get all the ins and outs of why I went into that. But that's in a different video, amongst other stuff that I like to talk about. So those 2 box sets were cool. Then they brought out a 3rd box set eventually. And again, another big chunky box set called Red Harvest. And in there you had some barbarians, classic looking barbarians, called the Dark Oath Savages, versus these weird spider-esque themed Chaos Warband called the Tarantulas Brood. And there's just loads of cool scenery. It's very mining, sort of like ironworks kind of like scenery with sluices and like mill wheels and stuff like that. Very Conan-esque, actually. I quite like that. And again, I had new dynamics in there. During this point as well, and I'm going to throw this out, I've said it many times on different platforms, but the rules didn't change that much at all. There was not like massive changes to the rules, lots of FAQs, just the odd tweak here and there. The one big rule I remember in was one ability got changed ever so slightly, and it was like, instead of it being +1 attack for everything, it was +1 attack for melee, and that was it. So a really well-written rule set that had very minimal changes across these 3 box sets, which was great. Now, during this period, a lot of the bespoke Warcry related content was just chaosy. Apart from the Cainite Shadowstalkers, it was all very chaos themed, which made sense because it was about chaos warbands fighting against each other. But for the rest of us who may not have had chaos or weren't interested in chaos, there was some rule books that came out, or at least compendiums, that had lots of other stuff that you could use for all the other factions. Lots of cards as well. I mean, I've got a big folder full of cards, and you could buy these in like little sort of like foil packets, and you'd open them all up. They've got the fight cards in there. They had like all the ability cards and stuff. It was great. It's a bit like a card collecting sort of bonanza for me. I was just like, I went mad collecting all these. But I loved it. It was good, and I could use whatever I wanted, and that was the key, I think, with this game as well, is that you could use what you want, how you want. You've got your rules, you've got your narrative, but you can change that, like I did with my Hag Valkyr. It was great for that. Loved it. But yeah, making it open to everybody was a good move, because then you could bring orcs into it, you could bring Seraphon into it, you could bring your Stormcast into it. Why would Stormcast be in the Varan Spire fighting these guys? I'm sure we could all find cool narrative hooks. I found a good narrative hook, which was basically saying there's a whole lost order city here and people are searching for artifacts. Kind of fell down the route of being more Mordheim-esque in a way, but that was my personal choice. You can do what you want, and that was really, really good. At the time of recording, the rules are completely free. You can just go to the Warcom site, link in the description, and you can download the PDF of the rules and every single fighter card and ability available for every Grand Alliance and every faction. And if you don't know what I mean by that, in Warhammer or Age of Sigmar and Warcry, you have Grand Alliances. So that's Death, Order, Chaos, and Destruction. And within those, you get your factions. So in Order, as example, you would have like Stormcast, you'd have like Cities of Sigmar, Sylvaneth, Ideneth. So they're all broken into factions. You can get all the fighter cards for whichever collection you have or want to do. Because you might not be interested in chaos-related stuff. You might want some Fire Slayers, or you might want some Lizard Men fighting. Doesn't matter. All the rules are there. And I was trying to scratch my brain a bit, thinking like, I've never done that before, where they're just giving everything for free. Other than when Warhammer blew up and Age of Sigmar started, the rules were free, because it was like 4 pages. And then all the sort of, I guess, data sheets, war scrolls, were free downloads, because you can click them off the website. But other than that, I don't remember any other time that Workshop's given an entire rule set for free. It's mad. But, that's why I think it's super accessible and cheap way of getting into wargaming if you've never done it before, because all you need is a handful of figures. Warcry is one of those games where you don't need like 1 million soldiers. You, at most, and this is even if you're doing a campaign, at most you'll need 15 figures. Most warbands tend to be like somewhere between 3 to 10, depending on which ones you pick. Depends how beefy you want them, how strong you want them. But yeah, you don't need a metric ton of figures to play the game, which is awesome. Scenery, yes, I know. I get slated a few times when I talk about entering or getting into wargaming. You've got to think of the scenery side of it as well. I mean, you can make scenery out of anything. I mean, check out this video if you want to make it out of cheap wooden blocks from a charity shop. Also works for Warcry, which is great. So you can make scenery from anything, basically, is what I'm getting at. It's not, you don't have to use plastics from Workshop to enjoy your games. You can do what you want. Now, I've heard a lot of negativity about Warcry, and that's fine. Not everyone, it's not for everyone. I totally respect that. Not everyone's interested. But a lot of the negative comments I have heard, which tends to be the common thread, which is like, it's too simple, it's a game for beginners, it's not very deep as rules go. Strongly disagree with that. I think, for me, someone that struggles with reading rules, to be able to read a rule book, understand the rules pretty quickly, and then recall that information at any given point. I mean, I cannot play a game of Warcry for months, play a game against one of my friends, and still know all the rules in my head, which then frees up all that time to use my brain for strategies, as opposed to, what's that rule now for movement? What's that rule now for charging? Because I don't need the books. It's all in here. And as of yet, I've not made an error with my rules. Any time I ever really need the rule book is, because this doesn't happen as often, is when I fall off the ledge. How often does that happen? Well, it should happen more often. Peachy should probably fight on ledges more, maybe. But yeah, there's once or twice I need to like grab the rule book and go, what happens when I fall off a ledge? Oh, it's what I thought it would be. I'll take a hit. Cool. Wicked. But yeah, coming down to the negativity side of it is, I think the rules are so easy to learn and pick up. That is a bonus. Simple rules is a bonus, because you can then put your efforts into the strategy. And in Warcry, you get your abilities. Your fighters have different, obviously, strengths and weaknesses depending on what fighters you've got. But those abilities in game really do make the difference. They're the tactics. They're not just the abilities, but also the deck of cards, because it's the deck of cards that can make or break a game for your warband. And what I mean by that is you could have, and I've had this before, I'm going to give you an example. I always use this example, but it's a great example. I was running a campaign in the studio before I left. Actually, it was like a bit of a hurrah, goodbye, I'm going. Let's do a campaign and have some fun. And one of the players, who's very competitive but fun, was like, I love Blood Bowl. I know how Blood Bowl works. I'm gonna min max Warcry. I've got this. I'm like, okay, cool. You've not played Warcry before, but that's fine. You go for it. They worked out that if they did Stormcast, most you get about 6 figures. Stormcast, best warband to go for because they're super strong, got lots of attacks. This particular unit, which were the Vigilors, they're the bow-armed ones, they move faster than normal Stormcast, and I can get 5 or 6 of those in my warband, depending if I have primes or not. I'm like, cool, all right, so you've got 6 Stormcast, they've got 20 wounds each, pretty good, pretty tough, good at fighting, and they can shoot bows. Yeah, I think this is the meta warband that will win me every game. I'm like, cool, wicked, awesome, I like this. So in their head, they're very competitive head. They've already worked out that they've solved the problem of Warcry and know how to win it with any scenario with this one warband. Bless them, they've not played Warcry before, because what you have to do is draw out a deck of cards. There's a deck for scenery if you're doing like more match play kind of stuff to make it fair. I tend to just set up a board how I want to. You've got a deployment card, which dictates where everything's deployed. You've got a victory conditions card, which dictates what the conditions of victory are, hence the name. And then you've got the twist. The twist can be something really beneficial to both warbands or one warband, or it could be something that ruins both your day. In this particular scenario, the victory conditions were claiming objectives. There was like 5 or 6 around, if I remember rightly. He's only got 5 or 6 models, so he's got to occupy every single objective. That's quite hard to do. The twist was it's night time, so your bow-armed weapons are of no use. You can only see 6 inches. So his bows have become superfluous to this particular scenario. And then the deployment, because what you have to do in the game is you once you've worked out your warband in your scenario, you then break up your warbands into 3 groups. You'll have a hammer, a dagger, and a shield. And you try and make it as equal as you possibly can. So you put say you've got 10 figures, you put 3 into one, 3 into another, and 4 into the third. That's as equal as you can do it. And then, depending on the deployment card you've got, that then dictates where they deploy on the battlefield and also what turn they deploy on the battlefield. And unfortunately, the person in question, 1 turned up on round 2 and 1 group turned up on round 3, which made it super hard for them to claim many objectives. Whereas I had like 10 guys in my warband, he only had 6, so I was able to claim more territories and ruin his day. It was great fun, but also it went to show that no matter how hard you went in trying to think that you can win this game, when you pull those cards out, they really fluff it for you. And I think that's the strength of it as well. You might be sat at home now going, well, that sounds rubbish because I spent ages doing this Warcry warband and a card can just make me lose. Yes, that is a possibility, but also it encourages you to be more tactical in that game and really stretch your thinking.
They're coming on in the same old style.
Yes, and we'll have to meet them in the same old style.
And I think that's the key thing with the game is you can have a bad objective for your warband, but you can still win it if you're tactical about it. And that's, I think, the big thing about the game is it is tactics heavy. It just requires a little bit of thinking about how you go about doing that. I mean, I've had games where I have used my Splintered Fang and it's kind of like the floor is lava and you have to claim objectives. The higher you go up, the more victory points you get. And I was just getting shot to pieces by Kharadron Overlords, but then it only took like 20, 30 minutes to play through a game, which is pretty standard. The next game we played, he had dwarfs and he had to walk off the battlefield and get off as quickly as he could. They've got little legs. It took them ages and I just murked them as they were trying to get off. So some scenarios work better for one game than the next game. You know, you'll flip reverse and you'll be like, oh, the gods are against me this time. And that's, again, like I say, the beauty of it is you just don't know what you're going to get. And then the strategy has to like come into the game. You have to do a bit of thinking on how you use your abilities and how you use your warband. I don't think there's been a game where I played like, that's it, I can't possibly win this. It just requires a little bit of thought and a little bit of just moving around and see how it goes. A bit of bravado is probably what I'm looking at saying. Just requires some guts and some bravado, and then you'll find that the gods will look kindly upon you. Now, the game has gone through a fair amount of changes in its time. Since its first release, it was more about fighting gladiatorial fights or just tribesmen bashing it out against each other in the Bloodwind Spoil amongst old ruins, whereas now it's more about a variety of different factions and races fighting to try and enter some crashed Seraphon spaceship. Whether you like that or not, it's entirely up to you. I have thoughts. I am a big fan of the new changes when it comes to showing new warbands. Lots of itches to scratch. It's given, I guess, the sculptors and the designers lots more scope for coming up with like new ideas for factions, which I really like. I'm not a massive fan of the sort of narrative of the later stuff, which is this crashed spaceship. I'm a fan of like, you know, searching through crashed spaceships, but for me, that's more of a sci-fi kind of thing as opposed to a fantasy kind of thing. It feels weird. And if it was like more of a old ruined temple, like Lost Valorum in Bloodwind Spoil, that felt right. But for me, I struggle to get behind that narrative. And that is a personal choice. That's nothing against the designers and the writers because, you know, they put a lot of effort in and made a cool story. I just don't like that kind of story. I want to do my own thing, which is why I can make up my own things, which is why I like Warcry, because you can do that. I can continue down my Hag Valkyr thing or my Lost Valorum thing. I can use the game system. I can use the campaign system, how you go about claiming territories and stuff. I just change the setting. That's all I'm going to do. I'm not going to hate on it because it's cool. It's well written. It's just not for me. I'd rather find out about crashed spaceships in a sci-fi setting, like I said. Simple as that. But what I do like is all the new cool shiny things and the way that they've expanded, I suppose, like the scope of like, you know, you got like some cool lizard men sort of warbands, but then Cities of Sigma, that release was quite big, but then they brought out this cool little warband of the Whalder Corps with like dogs and like these like huntsmen and stuff. So with the later stuff, with the kind of amber sort of orangey packaging, you got the Heart of Gur box set that came out, which had two cool warbands in there. You had the Horns of Hashut, which I really like the aesthetic of those. Hashut being like an old god of the Chaos Dwarfs as well. And then you had the Rotmire Creed. Again, the aesthetic of that I really like it's got these weird sort of flesh trees, bamboo bridges, bones and like carcasses everywhere and stuff like that. So that was quite cool, like these two warbands fighting this weird forest kind of aesthetic. Then it moved on to using very similar scenery with a few little tweaks here and then. Again, because it's getting closer to this Seraphon crash spaceship. I just wish it was just a ruined temple as opposed to a spaceship. It doesn't matter. Stop going about that, Peachy. Stop flaying that dead horse. But you got some cool aesthetics in there, cool designs, and you got the Quest of Soul Swarm, which are the Stormcast, and then the Royal Beast Flayers, which were like a cool load of ghouls, flesh eater courts kind of things. So again, that set had nothing chaos in it. It was undead versus Stormcast, which was really, really cool. And then the set which I've got up here, which is the Sundered Fate, you've got a bunch of Seraphon, lots of skinks and chameleons versus these cool Jade Obelisk dudes, which again, they have a Zinchian vibe to them. Then you've obviously got more Chaos stuff that's come out. So you've got the Chaos Legionnaires and the Claws of Karanak, which are very Khorne heavy in their aesthetic, which is really cool. So you've got lots of cool stuff that aren't just Chaos as well. So with the latest one, you've got Pyre and Flood, which is Lumineth versus Nighthaunt, which looks really, really cool. And then just loads of other stuff in between that. So you've got like the best looking Fire Slayers I've seen today. I really like the Fire Slayers in this set. And then you have my personal favourite, the new Cities of Sigma Wilder Corps. I'm going to use these for Witch Hunters for more time as well. So not only will I make them usable for Warcry, but give them a Witch Hunter vibe as well. Because I've seen a few people talk about this and do some conversions, like one or two, especially with all the Witch Hunters that have come out recently for like Age of Sigma, stuff like that. So yeah, absolutely well on board for making a Witch Hunter warband later on down the line for this game and for more time. And then you got like weird sort of beasts, like ogre ones, like the Gorges, if you remember Gorges from the old Ogre Kingdom, so you got those as well. There's a nice mix, a nice broad spectrum of different warbands to use in the game. And I'm a big fan of that. I like seeing more things being made for Warcry, very bespoke warbands with all the cards, because I'm a big fan of collecting the cards. So if I was to throw in a small amount of Peachy negativity into this video, it's going to be about the cards. Now, I spent a lot of money, my own money. It wasn't free. I didn't get them for free because I worked at Workshop. I spent money on these. These are the cards. These are my Warcry cards, right? I spent a lot of money on collecting these. Yes, you got some in the rule books. You got some in like different sets and stuff like that. You know, like some of the Stormcast ones you get like in a box of Stormcast figures. But a lot of them you'd get in like these little like foil bags that you'd like pay money for, because I was like, oh, I know someone that's got some Idnef, so I'll get some cards for Idnef. I just wanted to collect them all as well. Being a creature of habit, I like to collect things. So I spent a lot of money on them, as you can see. There's a lot in there. But then when they moved to the newer ones, I've got some different things in there, which I made myself, which I'll come to in a bit. When they moved to the newer format, and design aesthetic for Warcry. They obviously had tweaks for the existing warbands that are out there and then changed everything, whether that was like a points cost or one stat. Everything got a change, which meant all the old red cards that I had were no longer usable. And that's just a bit frustrating, really, because if you spent a lot of money on it, it kind of burns a bit, especially when you've got them nicely packaged in a folder. And I guess this is just like a personal thing, really. It's like, I spent a lot of money on these cards. I like collecting them. I like collecting them in a nice ordered way. Yes, you can get them for free. I'm well aware of this, and I can download them for free and I can cut them out and can put them in these sleeves, but it doesn't feel the same. It's not card, it's random cartridge paper that's been printed out. It doesn't have the same kind of feel to it than a collector card. And that's the thing that's bothered me the most. Now, believe it or not, there is quite a large and wonderful Warcry community out there, a lot more than what you'd probably think. And it's supported, it's very well supported. I mean, you've got Optimal Game State, so one of my patrons, Barry, has worked upon that, and he does a lot of Warcry content on his channel. But he showed me this cool Warcry card creator that's been designed, and I made my own characters sheets using my own figures, which is mega. So if there's something that you feel that's like a gap, or there's a type of, I don't know, character or aesthetic you want to do, but you don't have specific rules for it, but you know that, oh, but there's these cool rules for chaos that kind of feel or give me that vibe, you can just do what you want. I mean, I've done that many times where I'm like, I want a Keeper of Secrets, I want a slashy demon in my games. How do I put that in the games? Oh, I'll just use the, I don't know, Cygor rules. It's still a monster. It's got like loads of arms, like snippy arms and big claw arms and stuff like that. So that fits, that works. I'll do that. I'll just change the name or just use those rules. It doesn't really matter. So you can make things work for you. With the card creators, you can even make your own factions. I made my own Sisters of Sigma faction. I got some man-eaters or ogres that I wanted to have as mercenaries. Again, I made cards for them. So you can do, I mean, it's up to you how you do it. I mean, you can just make cool characters. If you're like running a game and you're the GM, you can do what you want, right? But if you're playing like a match play game, you might want to have a conversation with your friends going, I want to do this. What are your thoughts? And then maybe try it and then see how it goes. And you might need to either, it's like underpowered or overpowered. You make some tweaks based on that. So that is another cool thing about Warcry, is the extra scope of customizability that you can do in the game. And I'm just going to start making up my own factions all the time and the card creator that is on Optimal Game State is you can put your own photos in as well. So I stuck up my own photos. At the time, I just did some shots on white, but now I've got better at removing the background. I used an app to remove the background so I can do some better shots. I've even done some for Star Wars. I'll just show them now because I want to play some Star Wars games. I did put a post out ages ago on Instagram. And these have not been play tested, so you're probably looking at these rules and going, blooming heck, Peach, these are a bit overpowered. In my head, I've played enough Warcry. I'm like, that seems right, but I've got to play it. I've got to try them out. I'll probably put a link in the description so you can get it if you really want them and play games with them. I need to work out how to do that first. But yes, you can do your own characters and your own unit types. You convert what you want and then make rules for it using this great little creator, this little fighter card creator. So as it stands, I'm quite intrigued to see where Warcry will go. With all the new warbands coming out and the, I guess, expansion of the storyline, I guess, that's really intriguing. Like I said, I'm not massively fussed about this crash spaceship, but seeing where it will go and maybe like other areas that might be explored is quite exciting. The fact there's investment in the warbands, very exciting. A little bit sad about the fact that a whole bunch of warbands have been removed. Still not quite sure why that is. I don't know if it's a stock related thing or if it's because it's been repackaged. But I'll put a list up of the Warcry warbands that are no longer available, as in, like, to my knowledge, no longer available, completely gone. And some of those are like only a couple of years old. So I'm very baffled by that. I'm sure it all makes sense to someone back at head office, but to me, who's an avid fan of Warcry and played lots of games and worked at Workshop, it's a bit baffling. But, you know, there's reasons for everything. I'm sure there's a plausible reason as to why they're no longer available. By all means, throw your thoughts into the comments as well, because, you know, it'll be interesting to see what other people's thoughts are about this. It's just very odd from my point of view. So I'm a little bit worried as to where the future of Warcry goes as well, because when I was certainly at Workshop and in marketing, it was often treated like as an annoying cousin. because there's a lot of time and investment been made in this game, and it had big box sets, but it was always a bit like, oh, we have to do something for that, won't we? So I was always a bit worried by why does it not get the love it deserves? It should get a lot more love. It's a great game, and I'm going to come back to this point now, which is it is a great game for the sole reason it's so easy to pick up, so easy to learn, that I think it's one of the best introductions into the Warhammer hobby. As skirmish games go, Kill Team is also pretty good, but I think the rules are a little bit more advanced for someone that doesn't know anything about wargaming or Warhammer or anything like that. There's a little bit more investment required to get used to the rules. Even I struggled with the Kill Team rules. There's a few little things like, what is going on here? Again, I'm sure I'll do a video on that down the line, but I like the models for Kill Team, so that's cool. There's lots of cool, shiny things to get into, especially if you're into 40k. But yeah, Warcry, great rule system, really simple to pick up, free, fast paced. You can play a game in half an hour. You don't need lots of scenery, to be honest with you. The scenery is just there to make the board look pretty. Granted, you can hide behind bits to give yourself a little bit of extra toughness or whatever. I've taught my lad how to play Warcry. Granted, I've removed abilities because he's 6. I think that's an extra level of complexity he can live without. And the dice mechanic when you do activation, where you have to work out how many singles, doubles, triples, quads you get, it's not necessary for him because he's not using abilities. So I've removed those two, but the rest is there. So he's enjoying smacking barbarians in the face with swords. He gets that. He understands the basic rules, the activation, the stat lines and how they all work. So it's pretty good. Speaking of which, you know what? I'm going to have a quick overview of the rules, seeing as I'm here and I love the game. So if you are new to Warcry or know nothing about it and are intrigued, then I'm just going to give you a quick overview on how the game system works. So first up, with a game, you have to work out the scenario. So normally you have 4 decks of cards, one which works out your scenery, so how the scenery is set up. Most of the time this is like designed for match play, or if you just can't be bothered to decide where the scenery is going, pull out one of the cards that's relevant to the scenery set you've got. Then you have the deployment card. Now you'll notice there's some symbols on these deployment cards, there's red and blue. Each symbol is representative of something called a battle group. What you have to do in the game is let's say you've got 10 figures in your warband, you have to break them into 3 groups. One's called a dagger, one's called a shield, and one's called a hammer. Try and make it as equal as you can. So going with a number of 10 warriors, you've got 3 in one, 3 in another, and 4 in a third. So let's put 3 in a dagger, 3 in a hammer, and 4 in a shield. Sorted, easy. Then what we're going to do is we now know where they are deployed on this little map. You've got a little arrow at the top, which basically tells you that's north. So that is what we're going to be using. So you pick a tape, point on the battlefield when you're playing with your mates, going, where you're sat, Joe, that's north. Okay, cool. Looking at the little map, we now know where everyone's been deployed. So the battle groups, the dagger, hammer, and shield, on this map are representative of where your models will be deployed. So if, let's say, for instance, the shield or whatever is in the center, then that is where your guys deploy. Now, they usually deploy 3 inches around that marker. If they're like smacking like a quarter corner, then that's where they go. Again, 3 inches of that. Sometimes they have a nice little broad sort of line either side of them. It's anywhere in that quarter on that edge. But you'll also find that some say round 2 and some say that round 3, which basically means that's the round they turn up on. The next thing you need to pull out is the victory conditions. Now these vary, there's quite a few depending on which games you've got, so whether that's the very first game or all the other box sets, you will accrue a lot of different victory conditions. These will tell you what you need to do. It might be you need to kill the enemy leader by round 3. It might be that you need to claim so many objectives by round 4. Most of the time the games last 3 to 4 rounds, but if it's like a killy thing, sometimes it's until the enemy leader's dead, and that's when the game ends. So some of them are round based, some of them are just until the thing is done, which is great. But it does make it a little bit more complicated if your guys are turning up on round 3 and the game ends on round 3. So you have to really, really think fast with that particular deployment. Then you've got the twist. The twists can be really good and they can be really mean. So it could be it's nighttime, you can't shoot your bows, or it could be there's some cool electrical field going around that anyone can use as a spell or an ability with their side, which is great. So the twists are a twist. They can be beneficial or negative. So now you've worked out where your scenery is going, where your models are going, what turn they're turning up, what the victory conditions are, and also what the twist is. Cool. What we now need to do, we know the battle groups, we need to roll off activation. So what you do here is you get 6 dice, you roll them all. The point of this is twofold. Firstly, depending on how many singles you get, so, things aren't doubles, triples, quads, the person that has the most of those gets to go first. Great. Then you work out how many doubles you've got, then you work out how many triples you got, then you work out how many quadruples you got. Also, with the activation dice, you get something called a wild dice. Now, this dice is great because what you can do with that is you can increase the amount of singles you have. It doesn't matter about the number on the actual dice. You can just say, I've got 5 singles. I'm going to make 6 singles now if I wanted to. Or you can increase a double to a triple to a quad, or even a single to a double if you really wanted to. So that's what the wild dice are for. They're great. And you can save them as well and use them later on. So if you didn't use a wild dice, I can then save that for the next turn. What you can't do with those is have 2 wild dice to make like a double to a quadruple. You can only use 1 wild dice per sort of group, if you like. So yes, be tactical with your wild dice. All of these do something with the abilities. So you'll notice on like the universal abilities card, you have something called Onslaught, which has +1 attack. That's a double. If you've got 2 doubles, you can spend one of your doubles to give your fighter +1 attack. Amazing. And that's for both activations, which I'll come to in a moment. Or you can do something like Rampage, which is a quad, which is quite rare to get hold of, but it gives you a free move and then a free attack. Now that is very particular in the way it's written and the order you must do it. You must do your free move and then your free attack. If you don't want to move, you don't have to, I suppose. The option is there. But you're now saying, Peach, what's an activation? Well, that's simple. That is when you activate your characters. Every character gets to activate and then gets 2 activations. Basically, that could be move, move, fight, shoot, move, shoot. Whatever order you want to do it, you get to do 2 of them. And that's great. You can, however, save one of those activations and have something called a reaction. That's a newer mechanic with the more newer releases of Warcry. I've not really used that much. I tend to like to spend my activations in one go, and that's usually smacking people in the face with a big hammer. But the strategy is there if you're like, you know what, I can only move right now. Do I move again or do I stay where I am? You know what, I'm going to save that actual activation and use it as a reaction in case anyone gets close to me or I see an opportunity to do something. And depending on your faction and the universal ones, you can do specific things. A lot of the time it's just like hit back or parry. But then you get faction specific ones. I don't know all of them off the top of my head, but every faction has a reaction and you can read it for free on the PDF and know what they do. So what I'm going to do now is talk through the fighter card. Now, there's lots of weird symbology and pictures and numbers and you're like, what do they all mean? Well, I'm going to talk through it. I'm going to use the Slaughterborn as the example. So if we're looking at the top, there is a little picture in that top far left corner. That is the faction. That is my Dark Oath Savager faction. Cool. Then if I move across to the right a little bit, there's some numbers there. This says 170. So that is his points. That's how much he's worth. If I want to buy him, you usually get 1,000 points to spend on your warband. That's how much he costs to use in my warband. Now we're going to look at this larger circle here of all the 8-pointed star bits coming off it. It's broken into 3 segments. There's one with an arrow that has a number. That number 4 represents how many inches he can move per activation. So if I'm doing 2 activations, I want to move twice, I move 4, then I move 4 again. Simple. The round thing, which looks like a sun, is meant to be a shield, like a Chaos' shield. I would have probably gone for a heater shield design here, actually, because everyone knows what a shield looks like with that style, but it doesn't matter. Irrelevant. That is a shield that represents how tough he is. So he's toughness 4. And then the skull is how many wounds or damage he can take. 20. Seems a lot, doesn't it? But actually in Warcry, that does not last very long at all. Now next to him, just a bit further down from the points, just here, is a little icon. Now that's representative of him being a leader. Not every model, but a lot of models have different icons here. They all might mean different things, and these are relevant on the abilities card. So if I pull up the abilities card here, you'll notice on the universal one, there's something here called Inspiring Presence. And if I look at the Dark Oath Savage's abilities, there's something here with that symbol, which is a double, and it says Display of Brutality. So we can use that, but no one else can use that because that's only usable by him or the leader, anyone with a leader mark, basically. So yes, that's what that means. As you can see on the Dark Oath Savages, there's a couple of different icons. They're relevant to different characters. The eye with a little twirly whirly coming out of it, that's for the wizard lady, the god speaker. So she has 2 things that she can do. It's basically like casting spells, I suppose. But yeah, every faction or warband will have a group of models that have different icons that all mean different things, and they can be used to use different abilities, which is cool. Then we go to this bar at the bottom. Now, some warriors will have 2 bars because they might have 2 different types of weapons. Some, like this guy, just has the 1. Now, it's a picture of a sword because he's armed with a big sword. That's what he's armed with. The arrow jumping into that little circle is representative of how far he has from a range point of view for hitting. Now, there's no base-to-base contact in Warcry. It is based on inches. So he has a 1-inch range of his weapon. So you don't have to be touching anyone. As long as you're within 1 inch, you can smack them, which is great. The sword with the sparkly bits around it, that is how many attacks this character gets. So he'll get 5 attacks. It's pretty good. Basically, that's how many dice they will roll when it comes to hurting stuff. The fist is how strong they are. Now, when it comes to fighting and working out damage, you basically compare your strength, so strength 4, against the target's toughness. So if I look at the toughness of my own character here, which is the shield, that's also 4. So if we're comparing strength versus toughness in Warcry, if both numbers are equal, it's 4 pluses on the dice to hurt. So if my strength is higher than their toughness, so let's say my strength is 4 and their toughness is 3, it's 3s to wound. If their toughness was greater, it'd be 5s to wound. Now next, we've got here a little cleave skull which says 2/5. So if I get any, like, let's say I'm doing quite well, my strength is higher than the opponent's, I need 3s on the dice to hit. Any 3s, 4s or 5s cause 2 points of damage on the model. But if I get any 6s, they're called criticals, and often you get like a cool little symbol on your dice for Warcry that is representative of a 6. That is a critical hit. Regardless of how tough they are, if you get any 6s, it's always that second number. So 6s are great in this game and they do a lot of damage. So that's the fighter card, that's their damage. If I just go to the God Speaker, which is the Haggard Lady Witch, you'll notice she's got 2 stat lines now for weaponry. So I can opt between her dagger or her spell. You know, you could say it's a fire bolt, you could say it's electricity bolt, it could be anything, but it's got a minimum range here of 3 to 7. So the maximum range is 7, the minimum is 3. So if anyone's closer, like 2 inches, I can't cast my spells. So I have to bring out the old dagger, but I need to be closer for that. So it is got a longer range, slightly less attacks, but it does a little bit more damage when it does hurt. So sometimes it is worth investing in using some of these different weapon options that they might have. But that's the fighter cards. So, you know, every model has a different amount of points. They have different types of weapons. Some are stronger than others, some are weaker than others, some are cheaper than others. And that's how your warband's built. Most of the box sets that come as Warcry box sets tend to be 1,000 points. So when you are building your warbands, that's usually, you can say 1,000 gold coins, 1,000 points, 1,000 credits, whatever you want to call it. That's the kind of number you're looking for gang creation. Now, you did notice he had quite a lot of wounds where it said 20, but actually there is no roll into hit and roll into wound. It's all combined into one roll. So once you've worked out your strength versus their toughness and you roll the dice, that is how many damage points you take off your opponent. There's no armor saves here. It is just one roll and they take damage. There's ways of getting damage back, so there's some spells or like some abilities that can heal you back up. So you've got respite, so as long as you're quite far away from your opponents, you can get some wounds back. Now, as I mentioned before, when we were looking at the weapon ranges, there's no base contact in this. It's all based on distance. This is where you can get quite tactical with your rules. So I can position one of my fighters with a 1-inch range weapon, fighting against another character with a 1-inch range weapon, and they could be duking it out 1 inch away from each other. Great, nice and simple. But what you can do is you can lure enemies towards you. So let's say you've got someone with a spear and it's a 2-inch range weapon. You can position yourself 2 inches away from your opponent and just prod them with a spear. Let's say you did that last turn. You've got 2 actions now. You can prod twice with a spear. Nice and easy. What that does mean is your opponent now has to use an action to move closer if they've got like a weapon that only has 1 inch, for instance, as a range. So that makes it more tactical for you because you've got 2 actions now. You can stab them. They've had to sacrifice one to move closer to you. Or you can like position yourself behind another person and do the same thing. And just really be an annoyance. So the range of the weapons can add an extra level of tactics to this game as well. Now, there's a lot of other things you can do in your activations. You don't have to just move, shoot and fight. You can disengage from combat if things are getting a bit rough. But the only downside to that is you only get a 3-inch move and you can't go back into combat with that activation. So you have to like position yourself further away. But if you want to heal yourself, it's perfect for that. There's also things like unlocking doors or activating certain things on the battlefield. Lots of little things, depending on the scenario, depending on the game, or which version of Warcry you've got. So if we look at Red Harvest, what you could do there is you can just jump on one of those platforms, pull a lever, and then pour a load of hot Varanite down the sluices, and anyone near it takes damage, but it costs an activation to do that. So there are things to bear in mind. Again, it depends on the rule set that you've got, whether that's Red Harvest or whatever. Catacombs, where you're opening doors, activating sluices. Different rule sets will have different things you can do with your activations. I mean, this is just like a quick overview of the rules. I mean, I could go into things like falling, climbing, damage and stuff like that, but really just the basics of like, this is what a fighter card looks like, this is how the activation rule works, and this is like the bare basics of moving and fighting. So really, at the end of the day, if you're new to the game, you don't know anything about it, it's worth just playing a couple of basic games, using a couple of warriors, and then you can then have a bit of a read. Once you've got the idea of the rules, that makes it a little bit easier to then go, oh, you know what, I'm gonna go with Stormcast because they've got cool abilities and they can do this. I now understand what that means, so I might go for that one. So you can have a bit of a swat, bearing in mind as well, they're all free, like I said. So if you're still on the fence about Warcry, it's fine. I mean, it's worth giving it a go. It might not be the game for you, and that's absolutely fine. You know, it's just my personal opinion. I think it's a great game. It's great for beginners, and it's got so much depth to it as well. But with the rules being free and you can just use a handful of models in the game, there's nothing really stopping you from trying it. Granted, there are plenty of other awesome games out there as well. I am just scratching the surface, as I've said on numerous videos. I've still got my Rangers of Shadow Deep stuff to try out, and I'll probably use Warcry figures in that, and I'm definitely going to use some of the Rangers models in my Warcry games. So I've got a nice mishmash of stuff I can just, you know, do what I want with. And that's the beauty of being removed from the restraints of Games Workshop and just getting to do what I want. Also, just want to do a big thank you to my patrons as well. Your support has been amazing. I really appreciate it. And I did a little reach out and said, anyone want to show off their Warbands? You're welcome to. So send them my way. And here's a little showcase of some of the stuff that the patrons have been doing. And I thought it'd be rude not to show what they've been painting. And some mega Warbands. And it's just nice seeing what other people do with their collections. So here is just a small selection of some of the awesome stuff my patrons do. You too could also be a patron and get your stuff shown on my videos as well. So there is a link in the description, so do click on that if you are interested. But as always, a massive thank you to these beautiful people, because your stuff is awesome. The community is awesome. I mean, I showed enough of my stuff. It's only fair I should show some of your stuff, because you are, after all, awesome human beings. But yeah, Warcry, love it. Great game. That's not like some weird brainwashing from Workshop. That is just a peach fact that I like that game. I always will like that game. It's a great rule system, and I will talk about it as often as I can and be enthusiastic about it as often as I can. I've not done it enough recently, which is why I thought I'd reach out and do a video. And just say, oh yeah, Warcry, it's amazing. But that's because I've been getting interested in lots of other game systems, and there is a lot out there that aren't Games Workshop games. So yes, some people are like, your eyes have been open, Peachy. It's true, they have. And you know, when you're in an environment working on game systems for a company, it's easy to lose track of all the other cool stuff that's out there. So yes, I will talk more in the future about some Warcry stuff, but I'll also like to spread that out and talk about other things as well. So don't think I don't love Warcry because I don't talk about it enough, because I do. But that's me done. Signing out. Love you all. Bye. Until the next time.